Look outside. Is the world more peaceful since the revolution? I see nothing but death and chaos. I would like to see the baby.
Alright, so this is part 3 in a series on the life of German director Werner Herzog.
It is essential for me to kill something each day.
The first part came out like a year ago, so in case you forgot, Werner Herzog was born in Munich in 1942. Now, Munich, Germany was not the place he wanted to be in 1942. And just 2 weeks after Werner was born, Werner and his mother fled to a tiny village in the Alps, right by the Austrian border. But a few years later, after things died down, they moved back to Munich, where Werner would start making films at age 19 with a stolen camera and 2 years worth of savings working as a welder. Werner would continue to make films throughout the 60s and 70s, where he would make a name for himself for creating a slew of poetic, beautifully crafted films, and also for committing like 7 felonies per movie.
And I told him I had a rifle with 9 bullets. Before he would reach a bend of the next river, he would have 8 bullets through his head. And the last would be for me.
It quickly became clear that Werner is the kind of guy who would stop at literally nothing to achieve his vision. And this really came to a head with the movie Fitzcarraldo, his most legendary work, and OSHA's worst nightmare, where Werner moved a real-life steamship over a mountain in the middle of the Amazonian jungle. The production of Fitzcarraldo turned out to be an absolute disaster, taking almost 5 years to complete. But in the end, the film got made, earning Werner massive critical acclaim and cementing his place as one of the greatest directors of his generation. So, now what? The thing is, 5 years is a long time. When Werner returned to Germany, his son Rudolf had just turned 9 years old. That means that for most of Rudolf's life, his father had been away making Fitzcarraldo. Not only that, Werner's lifestyle might have started to tear at his marriage.
And then 6 weeks after our marriage, he went to the Sahara. He didn't know when he was to return, and I didn't know whether he was to return. And after that, he went to Africa again, and I waited. And he went to Peru, and he went to Guadeloupe, and I waited, and I waited. And then when he made this giant work, dragging a big ship over the mountain, I lived a quiet life at home in Munich. And now he's going again, going away from me again. But I don't mind anymore. I'm sure he will come back.
Yeah, their marriage did not last long after this. On top of that, in 1983, Werner's mentor, Lotte Eisner, would finally pass away for good. The next year, Werner's mother would pass away as well. Werner doesn't like to comment on his personal goings-on, so I can only speculate, but I do think Werner might have had a change of priorities after Fitzcarraldo that might have affected what kind of films he chose to make going forward, because he stops pouring everything into these mammoth projects with 1,000 extras and no budget, and begins trending more towards stripped-down, easier projects that he can finish quickly and without as much physical and mental strain. Whether or not that's actually related to things going on in his personal life, I can't say, but there is a notable change in Werner's output after Fitzcarraldo. I wouldn't say that it gets worse per se, as Werner would go on to make some of his best films after this, but the golden age of the 70s is over at this point. So basically, his documentaries are about to get really good, and his fiction films are about to get really weird. But before that, there's about a decade-long adjustment period, where, to me at least, it feels like Werner's trying to find his footing again after Fitzcarraldo. Case in point, his next film, Where the Green Ants Dream. Where the Green Ants Dream is set in the Australian outback. A mining company called Ayers Mining is surveying the potential for a uranium mine in the region, but their work is disrupted by a local indigenous community who claim that this is the land where the green ants dream, and disrupting the land could cause the ants to wake up, spelling doom for all humanity. For this film, Werner was determined not to have a repeat of the Fitzcarraldo fiasco. No building camps in the middle of nowhere for this one. This time he's only shooting at drivable locations with air conditioning. The camera work is a lot simpler too, relying a lot more on static handheld shots. It's also Werner's first fiction film primarily shot in English. I don't know if he wrote it in English as well, but I suspect he did, because the dialogue is pretty well written, but also slightly wonky.
Ants! Green ants! Dreaming here!
That's the thing with dialogue in Werner Herzog films. Werner generally trends towards a heavily stylized, theatrical style of writing. However, for this movie, Werner's trying to write more realistic dialogue in a contemporary setting. But he just can't help himself. He has to inject just a little bit of theatrics. So the movie's kind of stuck in this pseudo-realistic middle ground, like Werner's directing an experimental British soap.
I know nothing. Nothing! Except one thing.
What?
I gotta say, I did kind of dread doing part 3 of this series because so many movies from this period are just fine. Like 6 out of 10. And Where the Green Ant's Dream falls right into that rubric for me. Now that's not to say it's a bad film. I'd say if you like most of the other Herzog projects up to this point, you will probably like this one too. All the classic Herzog hallmarks are here. You've got the beautiful landscape shots of the Australian outback. You've got the hard left turns into whatever Werner's special interest is at the moment. This time it's dead languages.
They call him the Mute because there's nobody left on this earth for him to speak with. He is the sole and final survivor of his people, his clan.
You even get the trademark weird animal scene, although unfortunately Werner did kind of botch it for this movie.
My problem in those months was that I wanted to film 400,000 ants stopping dead and mysteriously waving their antennae. I wanted them all facing the same way, like so many iron filings in a powerful magnetic field. I worked with cryobiologists, but all our experiments were useless.
Wait, cryobiologists? Werner, were you gonna use like liquid nitrogen and shit to mind jack 400,000 ants? I mean, this didn't work, obviously. So in the movie, there's only like a couple dozen ants in a box. None of them are real green ants, by the way. There are no green ants. Werner made them up for the movie. Where the Green Ant's Dream is also one of the few Herzog films I can think of where Werner gets blatantly political.
You better get out of here. Go back where you came from. Your civilization destroys everything, including itself.
This is something Werner has later regretted, or at least regretted the lack of subtlety in which the message is delivered. I do sorta get what he means, but it doesn't really bog down the movie or anything. And the mythologies of the Aboriginal people are my favorite parts of the movie. It's all made up for the film, but you can tell that it's informed by a genuine interest and respect for Aboriginal culture. I do wonder if Werner was, either intentionally or not, motivated by the negative press surrounding his treatment of the indigenous people of Peru during the making of Fitzcarraldo, so he made the messaging for this film a bit on the nose to hammer home that he actually does care about the indigenous people he's making films with. Where the Green Ant's Dream was nominated for the Palme d'Or in the Cannes Film Festival in 1984, then promptly disappeared into obscurity. Did it deserve better? No, not really, but it's still pretty good. For his next movie, Werner would make a documentary about child soldiers in Nicaragua called Ballad of the Little Soldier. But you're gonna have to go to Patreon for that segment, because if I started showing footage of 9-year-olds with Kalashnikovs, I think YouTube is going to smite me down where I stand. So we're gonna skip ahead to the next one, I think, which is The Dark Glow of the Mountains. The Dark Glow of the Mountains is a documentary about mountaineers Reinhold Messner and Hans Kammerlander. Messner and Kammerlander were both world-class mountain climbers. Messner especially held several world records at the time, including being the first person to climb Mount Everest without additional oxygen. And now, the pair is going for another record. They are going to climb 2 8,000-meter tall mountains in one go. A feat that has never been attempted before, and as far as they know, might not even be possible. This is another film that probably isn't essential in Werner's filmography, but I actually like this one a fair bit. The rapport between Messner and Werner is what makes this movie for me. Up until this point, Werner has generally kept a fair bit of distance between him and his interview subjects, but here you can tell that there is a real kinship between him and Messner that allows both of them to open up a lot more than they would otherwise. Messner is a guy who's lost most of his toes to climbing, lost family members to climbing, and yet, not only is he still obsessed with climbing, but he keeps finding more and more extreme climbs to attempt. It's interesting to see what drives a person like that, and I don't think there's anyone better to try and document this than Werner Herzog. Because Werner has such a calm, genuine demeanor about him, he can literally ask anyone anything, and they will answer.
Dr. Ainley, I read somewhere that there are gay penguins. What are your observations?
But he also knows exactly what to say and how to prod to get the response he wants, which is what makes him so lethal as an interviewer. And it's in this movie where you first see that side of Werner in action.
Und wie bist du deiner Mutter vors Angesicht getreten? Wie war das?
In fact, there are a lot of ideas and concepts in this movie which Werner would continue to refine and build upon for his later documentaries. Particularly the way the shots are stylized in this movie is very indicative of how he would go on to style his documentaries in the future. So many shots in this movie look straight out of one of his fiction films. In fact, this movie was originally imagined as a fiction film. The Dark Glow of the Mountains was meant as a test run for an upcoming film about K2, the tallest mountain in the world after Everest. The movie was to be filmed in the general vicinity of K2 and was going to star Klaus Kinski, if you can believe it.
Reinhold, große Frage für mich, die nicht ganz lösbar ist, ist, wie weit bringen wir die Schauspieler auf den Kinski? Der ist über 50.
This film never materialized, however. While working on The Dark Glow of the Mountains, Werner ended up concluding that making a film in the Karakoram mountain range would have proved far too treacherous. Also, Kinski's getting pretty old at this point, and K2 is one of the most dangerous mountains on Earth, so I think this movie would have literally killed him. But as it turns out, Werner had another plan in store for him. You see, a few years ago, while Werner was working on Fitzcarraldo, he was given a copy of the book The Viceroy of Whydah by author Bruce Chatwin. Werner immediately knew he wanted to adapt the book into a film, though he also recognized that this would be a massive undertaking, and he didn't want to do such a big project right after Fitzcarraldo. But then, a few years later, David Bowie expressed interest in adapting the book and was planning on casting himself as the main character. So then Werner swooped in and said, "The hell you're not. I'm gonna cast 60-year-old Klaus Kinski and you're gonna like it."
I had the feeling I have to buy it away from them as quickly as possible because not a person like Bowie should do it. He's not such a good singer anyway, and he's a bad actor.
Werner's film adaptation, Cobra Verde, would be released in 1987, and it would turn out to be one of the worst productions Werner has ever dealt with. Cobra Verde is the nickname of the infamous Brazilian bandit Francesco da Silva, who takes a job as an overseer in a sugar plantation. Though after he impregnates all of the plantation owners' daughters, they send him away to Africa to reignite the slave trade in the Kingdom of Dahomey, knowing that no white man has ever returned from the kingdom alive. Cobra Verde is, if nothing else, a very cool film. This is Kinski and Werner's fifth and final collaboration, and they really go out with a bang. Werner is once again doing a mammoth production with hundreds of extras on the other side of the world, but this time he is approaching the project with decades of experience in making exactly this type of film. It's a movie with so much life in it, so many moving parts, so many wonderful sets, so many impeccably choreographed scenes. I can't imagine how much work would have gone into making these shots work, but the movie looks absolutely stunning. The imagery alone is strong enough to carry the movie by itself, which is good because it kinda has to. Unfortunately, Cobra Verde is incomprehensible. This is Werner's first time adapting a book into a film, and while he does a good job nailing the visual aspects of the Bruce Chatwin novel, much of the plot ends up lost in translation, to the point where half the story in Cobra Verde is straight up missing. It's paced really weird too. Like, Werner tries to compress the entire second half of the book into the last 15 minutes of the movie, and it just doesn't work. I know Werner probably cranked the script out in like 3 days and didn't write a second draft or anything, and that tends to work for him. But in this case, I really wish he had gotten an editor, because with a proper rewrite, Cobra Verde could have been a real masterpiece. Alright, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to my second biggest gripe with this movie, the dubbing. Now, there is a fair bit of dialogue in this movie. Pretty much all of it is dubbed, and the dubbing is ass. I mean, all of the Werner Herzog adventure films have a pretty bad case of dub-itis, but Cobra Verde is just the worst.
Die Sklaverei ist eine Eigenschaft des menschlichen Herzens. Auf unseren Untergang.
I imagine there was no real way to fix this, as trying to record the dialogue on the spot would have made the production even more difficult, and it was probably bad enough as is. I think the issue was also compounded by the fact that a lot of the people Werner cast for this movie weren't actors by trade. For example, the King of Dahomey is apparently played by an actual king, His Royal Highness Nana Agyefi Kuame II Omanhini of Unseen. Now, Unseen is a town, not a country, so I don't know how far his regal authority extended, but just from watching his scenes, I instinctively believe his credentials. Moments like this are the lifeblood of Cobra Verde, but they're also probably why this movie was so dreadful to make. In total, Werner claims to have hired around 1,000 extras for this film, all of whom needed accommodations, food, water, transportation, which again needs fuel. Organizing all of this is difficult at the best of times. Organizing this in Ghana is next to impossible. The infrastructure that you need for a project of this scale just isn't there. Apparently, it was so hard to find enough plaster to make some of the sets that Werner and co had to literally smuggle it into the country via the Ivory Coast. The production for Cobra Verde was actually the subject of a TV documentary titled Location Africa, kind of this film's version of Burden of Dreams, though not quite as good, unfortunately. Burden of Dreams is good because it feels like an actual film, and you get to see Werner Herzog have a mental breakdown and start spitting Pusha T lyrics. On the flip side, Location Africa feels a lot more like a DVD bonus feature, but it has its moments, like when all the extras go on strike and start demanding that Werner double their pay.
What you are demanding from me is nothing else but blackmail, and you should know that. And I'm bowing under this blackmail, and I say 2,000 for you for each day. But go to work, please.
Kinski is still Kinski, obviously, but working on Cobra Verde was different, because he doesn't really give a shit about Werner anymore. Kinski had always been pretty dreadful to work with, but he always had an underlying respect for Werner and his films that curbed some of his worst impulses. But for Cobra Verde, Kinski is just completely over it, so their relationship is less like two firebrands butting heads over creative decisions, and more like a failing marriage, desperately waiting for one of them to finally pull the trigger and get the divorce already.
Das ist für mich ist es wichtig. Nimm nicht immer andere Leute in Schutz. Verstehst du? Müssen 10 Fehler nah sein. Attention. And don't talk and that door!
After Cobra Verde, Werner was adamant that he would never work with Kinski again.
Kinski now, as I've worked for the last time in Cobra Verde, somehow is over the cliff now, I would say. He will age very badly, in my opinion. He will take a bad end. The best thing for him, I really don't wish him anything bad, but I only wish him to die.
As for Kinski, well, all throughout the making of Cobra Verde, his mind was on a different project entirely. You see, for the last 17 years, Kinski had worked on realizing his dream project, a film about the legendary violinist Niccolo Paganini. He had asked Werner to direct the film several times, which he had declined every time, calling Kinski's 600-page manuscript beyond repair. Apparently, Kinski couldn't find anyone else to direct it either, because in 1989, he would direct the movie himself. Kinski Paganini is a film about the life of Niccolo Paganini, often hailed as one of the greatest violinists of all time. On its face, Kinski Paganini seems like it's going to be a biopic, and it kinda is, but there is something fishy going on here. You see, Kinski saw himself as spiritually connected to Paganini in some way, like they were the same soul in two different bodies, so to speak. So essentially what ends up happening is that Kinski Paganini is this weird mix of the life of Niccolo Paganini and Kinski's own autobiography. I don't know where to begin with this film. It's borderline outsider art. Because the thing is, Kinski Paganini was meant to be Kinski's masterpiece, his greatest artistic statement. However, while Kinski might be an acting virtuoso, he has virtually no experience actually writing or directing a film. This makes for a rather bewildering situation, where Kinski is simultaneously trying to craft his magnum opus while also learning how to make a film. I think it's fair to say that Kinski is setting out to make prestigious
litigious art cinema here. The film eschews all traditional forms of plot and narrative for a hyper-visual form of storytelling. In fact, the entire film is made up of a series of montages with only minimal dialogue, and I am amazed to say it almost kind of works.
I wouldn't say that Kinski Paganini is a good film necessarily.
It is utterly incomprehensible and more than a little pretentious sometimes, but occasionally there are moments where the movie just clicks, and Kinski Paganini actually lives up to the hefty ambitions that Kinski has for this movie. Most of the time, though, it's a hot mess.
First of all, the film just looks weird. There's clearly been a lot of effort put in to make this film feel visually coherent. The sets and costumes are all pretty good. The lighting is really interesting, actually. There are no artificial lights in this movie at all. All the scenes are either lit with candlelight or natural light. And while that does make some scenes very dark, it does give this film a certain look. But then, just as the film starts threatening to become immersive, Kinski hits you with the handheld shaky cam and tells you to pound sand. Look at this, the cameraman is clearly just transitioning between shots. Why'd you keep this in, Klaus?
Second of all, hope you like solo pieces for violin, because that's what you're getting. The soundtrack consists entirely of Paganini compositions, and while I think these pieces are nice on their own, the way they're used in this movie is incredibly obnoxious. Third of all, this film is edited by an insane person.
Papa.
This might not even be Kinski's fault, as the film was heavily meddled with by the producers. Kinski apparently wanted the film to be like 3 hours long, which sounds correct. After all, he is insane. The producers cut it down to 82 minutes for distribution, chopping out some of the more graphic sex scenes and restructuring the film into a vaguely chronological order. There exists another version of the film referred to as the versione originale, which was apparently closer to Kinski's original vision, but that one was only available as a god-awful DVD transfer for years, until it was released as a bonus feature on a 2024 Blu-ray release, which is sold out now, so whatever, I guess we're sticking to the theatrical version. But one of the main things that the so-called original version does is add a lot of the sex scenes back in. And I mean, look, this is European art cinema. Of course there's gonna be titties in it, but the scenes in this movie feel less like artistic explorations of human intimacy
and more like Kinski trying to give his character as many sex scenes as he can because he's a sleazy hornball.
The thing to keep in mind is that the character of Niccolo Paganini as he exists in the film is effectively a self-insert for Kinski. In fact, the way the film is written reminds me a lot of Kinski's own autobiography, which, from what I've read, is about half him boasting about what an amazing actor he is, and half him describing every single sexual encounter he's had in his entire life. So when Kinski writes Paganini in such a way where everyone can't stop raving about how great of a performer he is, and all the women in the film froth at the mouth whenever he enters their vicinity, it just feels like this whole movie is just a vehicle to further Kinski's own ego. And that vibe is established from the very first scene in the movie, which features legions of hot young women blowing a goddamn casket over this 62-year-old goblin man playing the violin.
Alzando gli occhi vidi quel povero uomo di Genova nel suo stato pietoso, prostrarsi in inchini ridicoli. Eppure è impossibile non amarlo.
Kinski is too old for this, man. The guy looks like fucking Edna Mode. And yet every single woman in this movie stops dead in their tracks to either make themselves sexually available to him or gossip from afar about how cool and attractive he is. Even the little girls, man, it is ridiculous.
Chi sarà quel signore? Beata lei, sì, è proprio fortunato. Che uomo affascinante.
Kinski, you're 62. What are you doing, man? You're still out here pretending to be a teenage heartthrob? You look like you're trying to take over Gotham City. Kinski Paganini was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 1989, where it got massacred. Kinski handled this with his typical grace.
Crétin! Crétin! Vraiment crétin! Moi, je fais une fatigue à venir ici, tu comprends? Jette-le dehors! Finis cette conférence de presse, merde!
Barely any countries picked up the film for distribution. When the film was being shown in theaters in Paganini's home country of Italy, the distributors chose to play the film while Italy was hosting the World Cup, effectively killing it. The poor reception of the film seemed to really get to him. Paganini would be the last role Kinski would ever do. In 1991, a lifetime of rage finally caught up with him, and Klaus Kinski died of a heart attack at age 65. 8 years later, Werner Herzog would do a documentary on his turbulent relationship with Kinski called My Best Fiend.
He was foaming at the mouth, and he moved like this.
The film features Werner as himself, as he recounts his experiences with Kinski throughout his life.
From living in the same apartment building in Munich to watching Kinski's movies in the cinema as a young boy. And of course, the 5 films that they did together. My Best Fiend came out 12 years after they last worked together for Cobra Verde.
So Werner has had a lot of time to reflect over their relationship.
Slowly, time that had passed has a miraculous quality. It makes things milder. I saw everything with humor.
The working relationship between Kinski and Herzog has been so mythologized and sensationalized over the years that it can sometimes be difficult to separate what's real and what's just part of the legend. Even today, Werner really likes to ham up their rivalry whenever he gets the chance.
I outconfidenced him, I outgutted him, I outlasted him, I outfigured him, I outfilmed him, I somehow outperformed him even.
Now, it's obviously funny to picture Kinski as this impossible actor who's only kept in check because the director is somehow an even bigger psychopath, but it's worth noting that a fair amount of people not named Werner Herzog actually liked working with Kinski. When reading the journals of the crew members of Burden of Dreams, for example, I was surprised at how many of them actually speak pretty positively about the guy. A lot of them found him quite funny and charming, and felt that his frequent outbursts were just a very messy but necessary way for him to blow off steam. Even Werner, as much as he goes on and on about how much of a pestilence he was, there's a reason he kept asking him back. Kinski brought something to Werner's films that sets them apart from the rest. And despite their disagreements, they usually ended up bringing the best out of each other.
Well, at least artistically.
And while Werner still portrays Kinski as a raging maniac to this day, it's also clear that he considered him a valuable creative collaborator. And maybe, in his own weird way, a friend.
And even though my mind revolts against it, something deep inside me tells me, this is the way I'd like to keep him in my memory.
Unfortunately, Kinski's story does not end there. Although he was already a controversial figure during his lifetime, the full extent of Kinski's conduct would not be publicly known until after his death.
Initially, Kinski's passing brought a renewed interest in his body of work. Kinski starred in a lot of movies throughout his life, and while he usually delivered stellar performances, most of those films were not very good. But you know how there's a saying about Tim Curry that for every one-star movie he was in, he was the reason it got that star? Well, Kinski was kind of the German version of that, so he had a bit of a cult following, especially in his home country of Germany, which persisted years after his death. Recently, however, Kinski's legacy has for the most part been defined by the numerous allegations of sexual misconduct. Several of his female co-stars have since accused him of sexual assault and violent behavior on set, with the most damning account having come from his daughter, Paula Kinski.
In 2013,
Paula would publicly claim that her father had sexually abused her several times growing up. His other daughter, Nastasia Kinski, would also claim that Klaus was sexually inappropriate with her. When put under enough stress, Kinski would seemingly admit to this himself. Quote, "Then Kinski threatened to do a whole lot of other things. He did not give a fig for the laws, and for the things he had already done, he should have gone to jail long ago. Then he described what he had done to his 2 daughters, Paula and Nastasia, probably meaning that as a threat. For that alone, he would have been given a 20-year sentence in the US. I should watch my back. He was not deterred by anything. When Klaus Kinski died, neither of his daughters attended his funeral." Werner's response to this situation is to believe the victims completely,
but also to separate the art from the artist.
I heard about all this, and I heard through his daughter herself about the abuses only after he had died. And I must say I absolutely believe her, because there were doubts in some media. I absolutely believe her. But I try to separate the person, the monstrous person, who did extraordinary things.
Now, I am not here to make a statement of whether you should or should not separate the art from the artist.
Werner's obviously going to be biased here, as that's his films that he doesn't want tainted, but whether or not this impacts your ability to enjoy these films is up to you to decide. Klaus Kinski is obviously a particularly vile case, and for me personally, I think some of his films do suffer from it. Kinski Paganini in particular can be borderline unwatchable if you know the context of Kinski's life, and something like Werner's own My Best Fiend just feels woefully incomplete if you watch it today, like it never truly addresses the elephant in the room. For what it's worth, we're done with Kinski after this. Cobra Verde is in the can. Werner finally stops doing low-budget epics with a million extras in the most inconvenient locations he can find and starts leaning more towards simpler documentary films with a much smaller crew. His next film, Herdsman of the Sun, is about the Bodabe people, a nomadic tribe living in Western Sahara who claim to be the most beautiful people in the world. The film after that, Echoes of a Somber Empire, is a documentary about the self-declared emperor of the Central African Republic, Jean Bedel Bokassa. But then, as the 90s roll around, Werner runs into a problem. He is dead broke. Now that's not a new problem for Werner. He's been pretty open about how some of his films were made specifically because he was in too deep with the tax man.
For example, Handicapped Future was a project that was brought to me, and there was a political agenda behind it, and I made it because I was in desperate need of money for paying taxes that was coming over me.
Obviously, Handicapped Future is one of them. I personally suspect that Huey's sermon was also made, at least partially, to raise money for Fitzcarraldo.
And by the early 90s, voila, he's in debt once again.
So Werner needs to make a movie right now, with a quick turnaround so that he can afford to pay his back taxes. This is probably the worst possible environment to be creative in. And for any other filmmaker, this seems like a recipe for a sloppy cash grab. But this is Werner Herzog, and he is about to deliver one of his best films of his entire career.
Lessons of Darkness is a film documenting the Kuwait oil fires during the Gulf War. It was originally spurred on by a request from an executive at the BBC, who suggested he make a film about the firefighters working on extinguishing the oil wells.
Every day and night, these 7th Corps soldiers witnessed the unbelievable burning of Kuwaiti oil wells ordered by Saddam Hussein.
Now, Werner technically did fulfill the initial request, but he doesn't even mention the Gulf War at all in the film. He doesn't mention Saddam Hussein, he doesn't mention Kuwait. When he talks about the firefighters, he talks about them like they're some sort of alien species.
The first creature we encountered tried to communicate something to us.
This is what makes the film so effective. Lessons of Darkness strips these images of any semblance of political context, and all you're left with is what you see on screen, and it's really remarkable. Werner's obviously the self-described landscape guy, and he really has a knack for presenting the world in a way you really haven't seen before.
For 60 minutes, there's not a single image which belongs to our planet anymore. You do not recognize our planet anymore.
The film opens with a haunting quote by Blaise Pascal. The collapse of the stellar universe will occur, like creation, in grandiose splendor. This quote is actually part of an innovative documentary technique called making shit up.
It sounds very much like Blaise Pascal, but of course I invented it, and Pascal couldn't have written it any better than I did.
The thing to keep in mind about Werner's documentaries, especially from this point on, is that they're not really documentaries in the journalistic sense. When Werner makes a movie about a subject, he does not strive to be neutral or to present the facts of a situation as objectively as he can. In fact, he often fabricates or misrepresents facts on purpose. This is part of a concept that Werner has coined the ecstatic truth.
And there's a wonderful saying by a French writer, André Gide. He said, I modify facts in such a way that they resemble truth more than reality.
Werner claims that by modifying the facts, you're able to present a deeper, more profound truth about a subject, and Werner does this all the time.
One of them holds a lighted torch. What are they up to? Has life without fire become unbearable for them? Others, seized by madness, follow suit. Now they are content. Now there is something to extinguish again.
What Werner is describing here is not literally what's going on. The firefighters are reigniting the fire for technical reasons. They aren't just doing this for some inner catharsis. But Werner is recontextualizing this footage to create a deeper metaphor. What happens when humans run out of fires to fight? Are we really willing to live in a world without fires? Or would we start new ones ourselves, just to have something to fight, just to maintain the feeling that we're fulfilling a purpose? Werner's been stretching the facts for his documentaries since the very beginning. Even back in the early films like Land of Silence and Darkness, Werner is blatantly just feeding people lines to say. But it's in this film where he really codifies it as an artistic expression. This is something he'd continue to do for his documentaries for years, but for Lessons of Darkness especially, it's a perfect fit. By downplaying the political and technical aspects of what's on the screen, Werner makes you engage with what you're seeing in a much more visceral way, and the end result is that Lessons of Darkness is an absolutely stunning film.
The oil is treacherous because it reflects the sky. The oil is trying to disguise itself as water.
This hybrid genre of pseudo-documentaries is what Werner would continue to do for the next couple of years, with films like Bells from the Deep, Jess Waldo, Death for Five Voices, and Little Dieter Needs to Fly. Now the thing about these films is that it'd be hard to talk about them without the conversation turning into dissecting European art cinema, and that's not really what I want to do in this video, so instead, let's talk about the film where Werner Herzog shoots the Loch Ness monster in the mouth.
So yeah, we've got the hotel on standby about vegetarian meals for you and all that kind of stuff.
What do you mean vegetarian? I do not eat vegetarian stuff. There's just too much vitamins in it.
By the way, I've arranged your vegetarian menu with the chef.
No, I'm not into that. It's a kind of a mistake.
Incident at Loch Ness is a mockumentary about a fake documentary by Werner Herzog by Zach Penn. Okay, let me try that again.
No, it's just such a big hamburger. That was really big.
Alright, so the plot of this movie is that Werner Herzog is doing a documentary about the Loch Ness monster called Enigma of Loch Ness. Zach Penn, who's the in-universe producer of Enigma of Loch Ness, decides to use this opportunity to make his own documentary about Werner Herzog called Werner Herzog in Wonderland, which is the film that we're supposedly seeing.
Come on in. My name is Werner Herzog. I'm a director.
So as the movie goes on, Zach and his documentary crew starts interfering more and more with Werner's own project.
Why, out of all lakes in Scotland, are they coming here?
Because this is the loch where the creature lives. And today's the day we're gonna find it. We've got...
Mikey, come on. Mikey, please. I'm shooting a film here, and when I'm doing a film, please don't walk into a shot.
This is all set up, of course. While the dialogue is mostly improvised, the actual events are all staged. Werner's actually the lead character, more or less, playing a slightly exaggerated version of himself, but he's like barely in character most of the time. It's great. I just love seeing him do normal things like buy razor blades and jaywalk.
A lot of different kinds.
No, that's a problem. Yeah, which one I buy? I better buy those though, because it has both of it.
It's worth going back to this film just because of the sheer novelty of watching Werner Herzog acting in a comedy mockumentary, even if the film itself is just okay. The thing is, while the concept of a mockumentary about a mockumentary by Werner Herzog on paper sounds like the greatest movie pitch of all time, it does impose some serious limitations to the format. Like, how do you write a coherent film when you're working with that many layers of meta-narratives? Unfortunately, this movie's answer is a lot of badly acted production drama between one mockumentary crew and the other mockumentary crew, and it's just not as funny or interesting as it needs to be to sell this. Werner and Zach Penn are apparently friends in real life, but in the movie they have basically negative chemistry.
I made a mistake, okay? I mean, that's...
What do you mean by mistake?
Well, I mean that
You actually lied to me. You just lied to me.
Well,
and that's a difference.
However, I must say, the sheer inclusion of Werner Herzog does rescue this film somewhat.
And you know what?
What?
This is the single most chaotic production I've ever seen.
Thanks, that's helpful.
And I've been on a couple of difficult ones.
Yeah, I know you have. At least we're not dragging the boat over a hill.
What did you say?
Werner is legitimately funny in this movie. It helps that the entire film is built around him, obviously, but then again, he is the most interesting person in human history. There are tons of references and callbacks to his older films here, some really obscure ones too that I didn't even catch until I rewatched it later. I don't know how well this film parses for someone who isn't already a Herzog fan, but lost in the sauce as I am, I do enjoy the fan service.
was just a surveillance camera in a shopping mall. 2 boys taking a toddler away, and they actually murdered him here.
Werner, this is,
Geez, Werner is talking about toddler murder at the breakfast table again. Now, I've already kind of spoiled this, but during the last 20 minutes of the film, it shifts gears completely and turns into a found footage horror film. It turns out the Loch Ness Monster is real after all, and not only that, it's attacking the crew. Now this part is dumb, it's cheesy, and it's awesome. I kinda wish the whole movie was more like this. In fact, give me a whole series of documentaries that's just about Werner Herzog hunting down cryptids.
The slender man in the middle, that's him.
Werner's at a point in his career where he doesn't really have anything left to prove. He just does whatever he likes. Want to make a documentary about an obscure Italian composer where half the facts are just stuff you made up? Sure, Werner, let's ship it. So I don't think many people expected that in 2005, Werner would create possibly the biggest film of his entire career. Grizzly Man is a documentary about Timothy Treadwell. For 13 summers, Treadwell lived in the Alaskan wilderness alongside wild grizzly bears. For him, the bears were like family. He gave them cute names like Sergeant Brown and Mr. Chocolate and doted on them as much as he could.
It's okay. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
During the hibernation months, he would visit schools around the country to educate kids on the wild world of the grizzly bears. For Treadwell, it was his mission to become a guardian angel of the bears and save them from poaching and other human intervention. And whenever he got the chance, he would travel back up to Alaska with nothing but a humble camping tent and a dream to live with the bears in perfect harmony.
And then here's about all that's left of the bear that killed him. A few pieces of rib bone.
Yeah, it was pretty much inevitable to end this way. As much as Treadwell loved those bears, it doesn't change the fact that grizzlies are 600-pound death machines evolved for murder. And if you're crazy enough to go out into the forest to live with them year after year, eventually, well, you're gonna get eaten. But when Treadwell died, he left behind around 100 hours of footage that he had captured on his trips to Alaska.
Both cameras rolling, both cameras rolling, both cameras rolling.
This stuff is prime documentary material, so it came as no surprise when filmmaker Eric Nelson started work on a documentary about Treadwell. But then, one day, Nelson gets a visit from his old friend Werner Herzog. According to Werner, he was just looking for his car keys on his way out the door when he randomly stumbled across an article about Treadwell sitting on Nelson's desk.
How far along is this project? Who is directing it? Well, I'm kind of directing it, Werner. No, I will direct this film.
And the rest is history. Now, seeing as this film was going to be made no matter what, I'm glad it was Werner who ended up doing it, because I think he handles Treadwell with just the right amount of grace. Treadwell is a complicated character. On the outside, he might present himself as this proud guardian of the grizzlies, but scratch just beneath the surface and you'll find a tangled spaghetti of neuroses and insecurities. I actually went ahead and read Treadwell's book, Among Grizzlies, and what really stuck out to me was just how much Treadwell talks to the bears about his girl problems.
I always cannot understand why girls don't want to be with me for a long time, because I have really a nice personality. I'm fun. I'm telling you right now, I'm not duking it out for any girl, but I've had my troubles with the girls. Yeah. I always wished I was gay.
Now, it's one thing to vent to the bears like they're your dog or something, but no, it gets a lot worse than that. There's this one section where he talks about a bear that he named Warren. Now, Warren was a sexually mature male bear who, according to Treadwell, had a habit of badgering the female bears into mating with him. Quote, "Eventually, Warren usually wore the females down and had his way. That's what reminded me of my human friend Warren Queenie. They're both good-looking, persistent, and usually get their girls." Like, come on, dude. If you're seriously at the point where you're projecting your own sexual insecurities onto the grizzly bears, you need to actually re-evaluate what you're doing.
I'm so passive. Bit of a patsy. Which, is that a turnoff to girls, to be a patsy?
Treadwell was obviously a troubled guy, and while dropping everything to go live with the grizzly bears was probably quite cathartic for him, it doesn't actually fix any of his underlying issues. In fact, living so long in the complete isolation from the rest of civilization probably made his mental health worse in the long run.
We're gonna need more rain. We need more rain! Downey is hungry! Tabitha's hungry! Melissa is eating her babies!
This is one of the reasons why I like how Werner approaches his story in Grizzly Man, because ultimately I think it's a very compassionate take on Timothy Treadwell. Not to say that Werner is naive in his depiction of Treadwell here. He doesn't hide his opinion that the guy is a dumbass.
We are not made to become brothers with the bears. That happens in Walt Disney.
Werner's also not particularly impressed by Treadwell living in close proximity to the bears. Quote, I found it ridiculous that everyone thought Treadwell was so courageous. Any idiot can walk up to a bear. And you might think, well, Werner, if it's so easy, why don't you do it? But the thing is, he did, for his book cover.
Can you show it to the camera?
Okay.
Because of the bear?
Yeah.
It's not a Photoshop. Lena, my wife, did it.
Oh, okay.
She was nervous.
But even if Werner might have had his own personal grievances about the way Treadwell conducted himself, it's clear that he isn't out to just document some nutcase. He wants to present this guy, this odd enclave of humanity, with as much clarity as he can, both the good and the bad, which, if nothing else, makes for a very interesting film. For what it's worth, while living alongside the grizzly bears might have been foolish, Treadwell must have done something right, because he survived alongside the grizzlies for a shockingly long time. But then he started getting careless. You see, Treadwell would usually stay with the bears during the summer months. That's when food supply is at its highest and when the bears are generally well fed. However, this time he was spending a week in October. Several of the bears that he usually stayed with had already gone into hibernation, and the ones who are left are roaming the area for scraps, trying to fatten up enough to survive the harsh Alaskan winter. And if a bear gets desperate, it might start going for food sources that it otherwise would have ignored.
Could Ole the big old bear possibly kill and eat Timothy Treadwell? What do you think, Ole? I think if you were weak around him, you're going down his gullet.
On October 5th, 2003, Treadwell and his girlfriend Amy Huguenard were attacked and killed by a bear. This attack was recorded by Treadwell's camera, though the lens cap was still on, leaving only the audio portion usable. Werner knew he had to address this audio tape in the film.
Everybody wanted me to include it into the film. The distributor, the TV network, the production company, everyone. And I said, I will address the tape because it is known, it's out there.
In the end, Werner chose not to play the contents of the tape in the movie. Instead, he shows himself listening to the tape for the first time while one of Treadwell's best friends, Jewel Palovac, tries to read his facial expression.
I hear rain and I hear, Amy, get away, go away.
This seems like the right call to me. I might have a morbid curiosity to hear the tape, but I think it's more effective to show it like this and have us imagine what he's listening to.
Julie, you must never listen to this.
I know, Werner. I'm never going to.
Werner has a certain way of staging his documentaries that I find quite fascinating. Like, often he'll direct his documentaries the same way he directs his fiction films. Sometimes he'll feed people lines, sometimes he'll have people repeat the same story multiple times until they get it just right. There's less of that in Grizzly Man, though there are still a few interviews that feel pretty directed to me, to the point where some of the conversations feel like they've been carefully rehearsed.
Don't you feel betrayed? That he did that he didn't tell you the truth about his accent or his origins? And that never bothered me. Timmy always amused me.
Another thing that Werner does that sets him apart from other documentarians is how he puts himself directly into his work to a large degree. He's never afraid to interject with his own thoughts and ideas, or to confront Treadwell's viewpoint with arguments of his own.
Oh, God, I love you and I don't understand. It's a painful world.
Here I differ with Treadwell. He seemed to ignore the fact that in nature there are predators. I believe the common denominator of the universe is not harmony, but chaos, hostility, and murder.
When it comes to the discussion of great documentary voices, I find that people almost always default to David Attenborough as their favorite, but for me, it's gotta be the Hog.
But there's nothing wrong about a 4-year-old smoking a cigarette once in a while.
Werner is the complete package. Not only is his voice like a Swiss hot chocolate on a cold day, but he almost always writes the voiceover himself, so you also get the fantastic tone of voice that he employs in his writing.
And what haunts me is that in all the faces of all the bears that Treadwell ever filmed, I discover no kinship, no understanding, no mercy. I see only the overwhelming indifference of nature.
The voiceover is such a legendary part of this movie, so it really surprised me how quickly it was thrown together.
I write it so fast that you wouldn't even believe it. While I'm editing, I'm writing the text, and I normally have a microphone, and I speak the commentary as I wrote it down immediately to the image. I do it very, very quickly. Comes to me very easily.
In fact, the whole film was produced in under a month to get it ready in time for Sundance, where it ended up being nominated for the Grand Jury Prize, as well as scooping up several awards at other smaller festivals. Grizzly Man is one of his biggest movies to this day, and pretty much the closest Werner's come to making a true pop culture hit.
Have you seen the documentary Grizzly Man?
Yes. Oh.
Another great Werner Herzog film.
Bill saw the Grizzly Man movie. It's called Grizzly Man? Grizzly Man. Oh, I can't get enough of this movie.
Accidentally, it's one of the best comedies of last year.
Accidentally. Yeah. I don't even think it's unintentional, because Werner Herzog's a genius. I think he made it funny on purpose, because there's some like smash cuts where you're just like, oh my god.
But this resurgence in popularity did not come without its problems.
I met up with Werner Herzog in the suburban wilds of LA, which he currently calls home.
In 2006, while filming an interview with the BBC, Werner Herzog gets shot on camera by a crazed fan with an air rifle.
Nobody cares about my films. For example, what was that?
You know, I don't think Werner Herzog has ever said the word ouch in his entire life. Like, he literally just got sniped, and his mood just changes from neutral to mildly inquisitive.
Nobody cares about my films. For example, what was that?
Of course, the BBC guys immediately start bolting towards the car. Meanwhile, Werner is like, whatever. This is like the 7th time he's been shot at. He doesn't care. He's trying to continue the interview in the car.
The world actually is not really very friendly towards filmmaking.
They end up in a safe place to survey the damages.
So this literally just happened when we were standing outside there,
camera.
And there was a noise, and it was a whiz, and you just said, "I've been shot." Look, you're bleeding. Yeah. Somebody shot at you and created a wound in your abdomen.
It's not significant.
He really is the most German man alive. The success of Grizzly Man would indirectly end up bringing Werner new opportunities, not just as a director, but also as a performer. Werner had already done some acting work before, not only playing himself in Incident at Loch Ness, but also doing roles like the dad in Harmony Korine's Julian Donkey Boy.
Come on, keep still. Don't shift around. Come on, be a man. Be a man and quit that moody proving.
But after Grizzly Man, he started getting cameos in smaller roles in bigger, more mainstream productions, including shows like The Simpsons and The Boondocks.
I felt my sphincter clench and my scrotum contract in shock at his response.
As of early 2026, Werner Herzog is credited for 35 acting roles on IMDb. Don't be fooled, though. He plays one role, and that is Werner Herzog.
I'm back. You're just stupid! You look so stupid. You look utterly and completely and irrevocably stupid.
That's not to say he's a bad actor or anything. It's just that no one else looks or sounds like that, man. But you know, he has a great presence. He has this immediate intensity to him that you can play straight for dramatic roles or subvert for comedic ones.
So show me. Show me you're rare. Show me you'll do anything to survive. After 47 years living here, I decided to move to Orlando to be closer to Disney World.
I want to bring special attention to his role in Zach Penn's The Grand, where his character is just called The German, and his character's shtick is that he strangles small animals for fun.
I've had a goat. To strangle a goat, that makes you feel really alive.
Now, what's funny about that is that in his autobiography, Werner makes sure to clarify that he doesn't do this in real life.
Let me say for the record that there is no part of my character that might prompt a writer to create such a part for me. It's pure invention on Zach's part.
Werner also, famously I should say, has a small part in The Mandalorian.
I would like to see the baby.
The thing is, Werner positively adores Baby Yoda in real life.
Did you see the Baby Yoda that was revealed in the pilot yet?
I have seen it on the set. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreakingly beautiful.
It got to the point where the director of the episode apparently had issues trying to direct him. Quote, Werner, I think, had forgotten it wasn't actually a live creature and started sort of directing the baby. He's talking to the baby as if it was a real thing. And I'm trying to direct him. And I'm just like, how did I get here? How did my life end up like this? They tried to do one shot with a green screen without the Baby Yoda puppet, just as a contingency. But Werner is not having it.
And that was a moment where I said, don't be cowards. You are the trailblazers. Show the world what you are doing. You see what you are doing. And my assessment of Baby Yoda.
Being a character in the Star Wars universe also means getting your own action figure. And wouldn't you know, I actually got the figure for him this time.
Look at this 80-year-old man, dude.
Where is Batman? I want to play with Batman.
Werner's contribution to Hollywood was more than just acting, though. In 2005, Joaquin Phoenix was driving down by the Sunset Strip when the brakes of his car suddenly gave in. He quickly loses control of the vehicle and veers off the road. His car flips and he lands upside down. In a mix of shock and adrenaline, Joaquin reaches for a lighter to fire up a cigarette. That's when he hears a voice from above.
I had to distract him and snatch the cigarette lighter from him because he was unaware that gasoline was dripping all into his car. I said to him, man, relax. And he said, upside down, he said to me, I am relaxed. And I said to him, man, you are not.
Werner helped him out of the car, and Joaquin thanked him for saving his life. Then, Werner disappeared.
And I don't know, with the percussion has to be very discreet, otherwise it sounds like the hippie stuff in Golden Gate Park.
I think this is a clip of Werner working on the soundtrack for Grizzly Man. Unlike most of his other films, the score for Grizzly Man was created entirely through guided improvisation. This is Henry Kaiser. He's not only a guitarist and music producer, he's also a professional diver who's performed several dives under the Antarctic ice sheets. While working with Werner on the soundtrack of Grizzly Man, Henry ends up showing him some of the videos he shot underneath the Ross ice shelf, and the footage is just incredible.
Stunning vistas unlike anything else on Earth,
with weird alien life forms that only exist here and nowhere else. Werner immediately knew that he had to make a film about this. And a few years later, Werner finally gets the chance to make a film in Antarctica, Encounters at the End of the World. Encounters at the End of the World is one of those films where Werner doesn't really have a plan.
All he knows is that he's going to the McMurdo research station in Antarctica for a few weeks,
and he needs to leave with a feature film. On his journey, he has brought a whole production crew with him consisting of cinematographer Peter Zeitlinger, and that's it. The entire crew is just him and Werner. And what do they film? Well, anything. Again, they have no real plan.
Most of this film is Werner and Peter snooping around at the Antarctic research facilities.
It did not feel like night, so we had a look around. This unobtrusive building had raised my curiosity for quite a while.
I think Werner was kind of hoping that life on Antarctica was a lot more desolate, when in reality, McMurdo Station is actually pretty close to civilization, all things considered.
McMurdo has climate-controlled housing facilities, its own radio station, a bowling alley, and abominations such as an aerobic studio and yoga classes.
Werner actually had to fight to keep this line in, because the television company didn't want to alienate the moms in the audience. But Werner's hatred for all things yoga is just too big to contain.
In Hollywood, by the way, you have yoga classes and meditation classes for the 5-year-old. So you just want to toss a hand grenade.
At McMurdo Station, Werner meets a whole cast of colorful characters. Some of these people feel like they were made for a Werner Herzog documentary, like the bus driver who was a former banker who lived in a Mayan village in Guatemala.
A Quechua Mayan village, 99% Mayan, and therefore nobody spoke Spanish. I had to learn the Mayan dialect, Quechua.
It's funny because you can tell which people Werner likes and which ones he doesn't, because if he doesn't like someone, he destroys them in the edit.
We had no water. He had used all the water tanks for gasoline. So basically we had a cup of water a day or 2 cups.
Her story goes on forever.
The absolute gall of this guy, man. Like, if he thought the interview was crap, he could have just cut it out. He just wanted to be mean. Oh, there's this one interview he does with a guy who's like a linguist/botanist. And it's so funny because Werner asks him a question, but you don't actually get to hear the guy answer because Werner interrupts him immediately.
Chunk, I think is how they pronounced it. And
to make a complicated story short, he ran into New Age ideologues.
But then, occasionally, Werner will stop talking and he'll let the linguist guy come back up in the mix for a few seconds.
About black and white magic embedded in the grammar of this language.
Some of the oral tradition that had been passed along.
Hence, in this stupid trend of academia.
Werner also pays a visit to the divers who collect samples from underneath the ice sheets. And of course, he makes sure to include a lot of footage captured during the dives because it is phenomenal. Now, unfortunately, they wouldn't let Werner dive down himself.
I was not allowed to go underwater. You cannot have an amateur trying to dive there and then an accident happens and retrieving a body or somebody half dead would take so many resources.
Also, I mean, he is like 70. I don't know if he has any business going under the Antarctic ice sheets.
Those few who have experienced the world under the frozen sky often speak of it as going down into the cathedral.
No one calls it the cathedral. Werner just made that up. The most watched Werner Herzog clip on YouTube is actually from this movie. It's when Werner goes to talk to a penguin scientist. Now, Werner had been warned that this guy specifically has barely spoken a word in 20 years. And sure enough, when Werner goes to conduct an interview, he struggles to get anything useful out of him. So to change things up, Werner starts asking him about gay and insane penguins.
Dr. Ainley, I read somewhere that there are gay penguins. Dr. Ainley, is there such thing as insanity among penguins?
And then, by chance, they spot one of these supposedly insane penguins.
But one of them caught our eye, the one in the center. He would neither go towards the feeding grounds at the edge of the ice, nor return to the colony. Shortly afterwards, we saw him heading straight towards the mountains, some 70 kilometers away. Dr. Ainley explained that even if he caught him and brought him back to the colony, he would immediately head right back for the mountains. But why?
This is really a quintessential Herzog moment. I think most nature documentarians would have a more pragmatic approach to this. I think they'd see this scene more for what it is, a penguin with a flawed sense of direction. But Werner frames this like a dramatic event. He brings on the sad choral music and asks what inner mechanisms drive the penguin to hurl itself towards its doom. This again comes back to Werner's concept of the ecstatic truth, because he's not interested in presenting what you're seeing in a factually accurate manner. Like, he's not using this moment to inform you on the navigational abilities of penguins or whatever. Instead, the penguin becomes a metaphor for something greater. When watching this scene, we as human beings instinctively prescribe human emotions to the penguin, be it desperation, ennui, a sense of adventure, or just sheer nihilism. And by doing so, by asking ourselves what drives the penguin to hurl itself into the abyss, this disoriented penguin becomes a vector of our own human thoughts and emotions. To quote the man himself, it's not as much a look at wild nature as it is an insight into ourselves, our nature. This quote is originally from Grizzly Man, but I feel that it could easily apply to this film as well. Now, okay, so in the original video, this is when I'd start transitioning into the next segment. However, there's been a bit of a development. In case you're watching this in the future, in January 2026, while I was in the middle of editing this video, this clip of the penguin heading off towards the mountains went viral again. But this time it went absolutely ballistic. This is easily the most popular any piece of Werner Herzog media has ever been ever, and it's not even close. My brother is like 13, and his entire class knows about the Werner Herzog penguin. Or knew, I should say. As by the time this video comes out, people have no doubt moved on to the next big thing. But I got points to make, so I won't let that stop me. I think it's fair to say that the penguin clip has grown much bigger than the movie it's originally from. And because of that, it has taken on a life of its own, detached from the original source material. This has led to a lot of strange interpretations of this clip that only make sense if you haven't watched the film it's from. In particular, there's been a decent segment of people who view this clip through a weirdly ideological bent.
Shortly afterwards, we saw him heading straight towards the mountains, some 70 kilometers away.
At the time this clip was big, there were a bunch of these edits circulating where the penguin is recontextualized into being like a renegade, someone who would never be content just being one of the flock, and instead is determined to pave his own way, no matter what pain he has to endure to get there.
But why?
Now, in the context of the original film, this doesn't make any sense, because it leaves out the part where Werner talks about how the penguin is going to accomplish nothing and die.
With 5,000 kilometers ahead of him, he's heading towards certain death.
Like, he spells it out pretty clearly, I think. The penguin doesn't seek to gain anything from what it's doing, except perhaps the freedom to die on his own terms. So the penguin is probably not the best choice for an aspirational figure, unless the idea of throwing yourself into your death for a doomed cause generates that kind of inspiration in you. In January 2026, the official US Department of Homeland Security Twitter account tweeted out this edit.
But why?
Wait, you guys really looked at this clip and was like, oh dude, that's us, dude. That penguin is just like the Republican Party.
With 5,000 kilometers ahead of him, he's heading towards certain death.
Here's another post from the official White House Twitter this time, featuring Trump holding hands with the Werner Herzog penguin walking towards what is supposedly Greenland, but I think you got the wrong pole, sir. Also, look at how massive that flag is. It's gotta be as big as the mountaintops. Alright, that's enough American politics for one video. Let's move on. In 1994, 3 speleologists discovered a cave in southern France. After delving a little deeper, they found that the cave was full of these beautiful cave paintings. This cave had been hermetically sealed for thousands of years, so the paintings had been excellently preserved. And what makes them even more incredible is their age. Carbon dating placed them at over 30,000 years old, making them the oldest preserved cave paintings in the world by a significant margin. The French government sealed the cave off immediately and has since only granted access to the cave to a select group of scientists. But now, for a few brief moments, Werner Herzog has been allowed in.
So it's 3:05. We have 1 hour.
Apart from time constrictions, we are not allowed to touch anything in the cave or ever step off the 2-foot wide walkway.
The first thing to note about Cave of Forgotten Dreams is that it isn't 3D. Yeah, this was right after Avatar and the height of the whole 3D craze. Now 3D is for the most part going to be a gimmick, right? But in this case it's actually kinda clever, because the walls of the cave are not flat, they bulge and concave, and the paintings are modeled around that.
And the drama of these formations was used by the artists. A huge bulge all of a sudden is the hump of a bison that's crouching, and from a niche a horse is walking out and looks at you. And
unfortunately, I am limited to the standard 2 dimensions, but even in 2D, these paintings are just sublime. These aren't just random scribbles, these are legitimate works of art. Couple that with the soundtrack, which is one of the best soundtracks in any Herzog movie, and you have some of the most stunning shots in Herzog's entire filmography. Now, is that enough to carry a feature film?
Well, your mileage may vary. I'd say this is one of the Werner Herzog documentaries that requires the most investment into the subject matter. It probably helps if you have a vested interest in art history, anthropology, or archaeology, because otherwise you might start feeling a bit lost when Werner starts talking about a stone arch outside the cave and then goes on a monologue connecting the stone arch to inner landscapes, to German Romanticism, to Paleolithic people, to opera, and then to Paleolithic people again. But even if I find this film to be a bit too thematically dense for my taste,
Werner still has a way of sprinkling in these quirky little touches that keep it from being too overbearing. Like the Paleolithic historian who's wearing like 3 layers of reindeer pelts while he plays the Star-Spangled Banner on a replica bone flute.
That's the thing with Werner's more recent documentaries. He gets sidetracked all the time, ending up in these weird rabbit holes that are only tangentially related to the rest of the film.
Like when he encounters Monsieur Maury, the French cave sniffer, who sniffs out caves like a truffle pig.
I'm trying to do things differently, as I have the habit of using my sense of smell in my profession.
Now, is that a real thing? No. Werner made it up. Same goes for the postscript stapled on at the very end of the film, where Werner gets distracted by a greenhouse running off of heated wastewater from a local nuclear power plant. This place is called the Crocodile Farm,
and is home to hundreds of crocodiles. Werner hones in on a few in particular,
who he refers to in the film as radioactive mutant albino crocodiles.
Not surprisingly, mutant albinos swim and breed in these waters.
This is also something Werner is just making up.
In reality, they're neither radioactive mutants nor crocodiles for that matter.
Instead, they're albino alligators imported from Louisiana. Here's another funny detail I noticed. Because the cave is in France and most of the cave scientists are French, some of the interviews are also conducted in French. Now, Werner famously speaks French, so he obviously understands them, but he always responds in English.
A single human. 1 meter 80 tall. That's big.
Was it only one person?
Une personne. One person.
You can only get some French out of me with a gun pointed at my head.
I guess with a film like this, I feel like anything I say about it is ultimately kind of moot, because I really haven't experienced it at all.
This is a film that begs to be watched in a proper cinema with the 3D effect on, and not in some cold studio apartment on a cheap gaming monitor.
It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone.
If this film seems even slightly interesting to you, and you ever get a chance to see it in its intended form, I highly recommend giving it a watch, even if just for the paintings alone.
I think in this day and age where art has been so thoroughly commercialized that more and more people treat human creativity as nothing more than a production bottleneck, there is something uplifting about seeing these paintings from so long ago.
It's hard to imagine how different life was for these people.
When these paintings were made, humans were still tens of thousands of years away from the agricultural revolution. Woolly rhinos and mammoths roamed the earth, and yet, art was still an important part of their lives. And in 30,000 years' time, if there still are humans around, we will still be making art. Not because it creates any material value, but because it's human.
In other news, please remember to check out patreon.com/drhugo, where for just $1 a month.
So, here's the thing. Werner has done like a million films, and I simply cannot cover them all. But to round off this video, I want to talk about some of the other things he's done. For one, Werner has shown great interest in curing modern diseases.
You see, there's a disease now coming at us, and the disease is film studies, film theory.
Werner has harbored contempt for film schools for decades now, and has long thought about starting his own. This would come to fruition in the year of our Lord 2009, when Werner officially launched what he dubbed the Rogue Film School. The Rogue Film School was established to solve some of the many problems with traditional film school. First of all, the length. 3 to 4 years for film school is too much. Werner has shortened it down to 3 to 4 days. The Rogue Film School is essentially a weekend seminar. It costs $1,500 to attend, but in order to attend, you first need to get accepted. every candidate needs to submit a written application, as well as 5 minutes of self-produced film. These applications are then thoroughly screened by Werner Herzog himself, who handpicks around 65 or so candidates who get accepted into the school. Now, what does Werner teach at his film school?
Well, he doesn't teach any technical stuff.
How to use microphones, how to actually operate a camera, none of that.
I teach them, for example, how to pick locks and how to forge a document, a shooting permit.
I'm guessing the lock-picking and forging stuff is a bit of a meme. I think it's partially there for marketing reasons, but in a way, it's also to foster a certain ethos. It's the rogue in Rogue Film School. It's the idea that you should be willing to do anything within reason to make a film.
You have to have a certain amount of, I say, good criminal energy.
Now, what films does Werner show at his school?
Well, not too many.
But he does have a substantial reading list.
It's odd, but listen to me. Read. Read, 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 read. Read, 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 read. 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 Read, read, read.
Werner reads books a lot more than he watches films, but he also lives more than he reads. More than anything, he emphasizes that as an artist, you need to actually live an interesting life if you want to make interesting art.
And work, earn your money with your own hands. Don't do boring office work. Work as a bouncer in a sex club or work as a guard in a lunatic asylum. I could be a bouncer in a sex club. I would be good at that.
The last update on the Rogue Film School, as far as I can tell, was in 2016. He has since replaced them with smaller filmmaker workshops, like the one that just happened in January in the Azore Islands. Other than that, Werner still has some ambitious project he'd like to attend to, like going into space.
But of course I would love to be out in space. They always take engineers and mission specialists along. They've never taken a poet along. And I have tried to apply for NASA for one of the shuttle missions, was never invited.
Werner also applied to the Dear Moon project, where 8 civilians were chosen to join a manned spacecraft around the moon and back. Though unfortunately, 76-year-old Werner Herzog did not make the cut. I mean, it didn't really matter. The Dear Moon project was cancelled in 2024 after its spaceship supplier, SpaceX, failed to deliver on schedule. And if you know anything about SpaceX and its founder, you know that's something that happens a lot.
There is a private company, SpaceX, which is pursuing this idea in practical terms.
Werner, you don't want to go there.
The founder of SpaceX, Elon Musk, is not just a dreamer.
Werner, turn back right now.
I mean, right now, we can't even get one person to Mars. So clearly...
I would come along. I wouldn't have a problem. One-way ticket.
That sounds great.
I'll be your candidate.
Okay.
On the subject of Elon Musk, in my opinion, his vision of 1 million Earthlings colonizing Mars is just a way for him to sell more cars.
But despite interstellar travel being out of reach in Werner's lifetime,
he can still dream about the great beyond. Is there life on other planets? Will they ever contact us? Maybe they've contacted us already.
3 million Americans have had encounters with aliens. 300,000 among them were women who were not only abducted by aliens but also gang raped. Why are all the women who have been abducted and gang raped, why are they always weighing over 350 pounds?
Werner, I am tapping the fuck out of this conversation.
One thing I will say about Werner is that for a guy born in the silent generation, he is remarkably up to date with popular culture.
He's a very curious guy, so it makes sense. But it's fun to see people get absolutely flashbanged by his pop culture commentary.
I watch the Kardashians. Not because I like it, but I want to see in which world I'm living. Could it be that the world of Barbie is sheer hell? And for the poet must not close his eyes, avert his eyes. And I have nothing against, let's say, once in a while, it isn't on the air anymore, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo.
Even if his film school might be a bit on the back burner, Werner has been doing more and more public speaking engagements in recent years, including going to college campuses to spread hope to the future generations.
We will have to face a world where the human race is extinct. So it will happen how fast, nobody knows, but probably faster than we think.
He's also published a lot more writing in recent years. Werner has been pretty adamant that in the end, what he'll be remembered for most is his writing.
My books will outlive my films.
I remember when I first heard that, I was like, oh, he's just hyping up his memoirs. But no, his writing is actually really good. Conquest of the Useless is genuinely one of my favorite books of all time.
This reissue cover kinda sucks though, I prefer the old one with the ship.
But as far as his writings go, I want to especially bring attention to his memoirs, Every Man for Himself and God Against All, because he does something there that I think is a real stroke of genius. He tells you in the foreword that the book ends mid-sentence, after he saw a hummingbird fly by the window. And the book ends like this. The dam in the Vaillant Gorge that withstood the vast landslide of 250 million cubic meters of rocks and earth and gravel. At its foot, this dam is 28 meters thick and poured from specially hardened concrete. This lower part would still almost certainly be there, standing majestically, without relaying any message, no message for anyone. There,
at the foot of the smooth concrete wall,
there would be a crystal clear trickle of water from the rocks to the side. It would be sought out by herds of deer, as though...
And that's how it ends.
Now, what I think is really clever about that is that not only is it a cool artistic flourish, but it also solves one of the fundamental problems with autobiographies, which is, how do you write a conclusion to a story that is per definition still going? Because Werner is not done. Since I started making this series, Werner has a new book out, a movie about elephants that he has since sold to the National Geographic, another movie in the works called Bucking Fostered that he's been wanting to make for decades now. Also, despite being 83 years old, despite never having owned a cell phone in his life, Werner Herzog is officially on Instagram.
But I had the feeling I should share work and everyday things with you, and so I'm opening an Instagram account for you.
Also, late-breaking update, Werner is in Warframe now?
What is Warframe?
Yeah, that's not a rhetorical question. Werner seems like the kind of guy who's gonna keep going till he croaks. He's a healthy guy too, he's got that old man strength. Who knows, maybe I'll make a part 4 someday. But for now, this is where I gotta wrap things up. Fellas, we're finally at the end. I still kind of feel like I'm rushing though. I didn't even talk about the operas, of which he has directed several. I didn't talk about the time he tried to reunite West and East Germany by walking along the border. I didn't talk about the time he supposedly helped Argentina in a border dispute with Chile, or about the time he tried walking to the Congo and almost died in a tool shed in Sudan. I didn't talk about his fascination for cannibals or his love for Disney, or at least one Disney movie.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal music. And it's Hollywood at its best. Lion King.
Oh, speaking of animals, I didn't even talk about the time Werner bought a bunch of monkeys for Aguirre, got scammed, and had to pretend to be a veterinarian to scam them back. I didn't talk about the monkey with a funny hat in Wojciech, or the monkey that starred in Fitzcarraldo named Tricky Dick Nixon, who got eaten before he ever got the chance to see the movie, or the other monkey Werner met in a pub in Peru, or the monkey he met in the Central African Republic that was addicted to cigarettes. You get it. You can make 100 videos on this guy, but I am just a man, and I can't do this forever. If nothing else, Werner Herzog is a very interesting guy. He has a lot of good movies, some great books, but what I admire most about him is his consistency as an artist. Roger Ebert once said that Herzog has never created a single film that is compromised, shameful, made for pragmatic reasons, or uninteresting. Even his failures are spectacular. Now, I personally wouldn't use the word spectacular, as in spectacle, because some of his movies kinda drag, but I will say this. Every Herzog movie I've seen has had a spark, an idea or an image or an angle that captures something uniquely profound. Even if he's not always able to extend that spark into a whole film, it means that even his duds have something to them that makes them worth engaging with. And that is a very rare thing, especially for someone this prolific. And it's something that really sets Werner Herzog apart as an artist. After spending over a year on this series, and probably over 1,000 hours in total, it feels weird to wrap up a project like this, but I think I've already said enough. Thank you so much for watching.
Werner, are you familiar with YouTube?
Not really, but I have eventually seen Dr. Hugo maybe 4 or 5 things at YouTube. Fortnite